So first of all, I want to welcome all of you to this meeting tonight of the Norwood Park Historical Society, where we're going to hear about the Edgewater Beach Hotel, and I would venture to say that probably most of you have visited the place, danced on its floors, or dined there, and so forth, right? Okay, and that's why you're here. Otherwise, it doesn't exist anymore, so you can't go back there. Okay, but before we get into that, I just have some comments to make about our past president, Judith McIntyre, who passed away on November 18 of just a couple of days ago after a long illness. And maybe some of you know her from the neighborhood. Maybe some of you know her from activities around here. Maybe you visited here and you saw her working in the garden and thought she was a caretaker or somebody like that. But she was the president and a worker. She came to the board of directors of the Norwood Park Historical Society during her golden years. That was after she retired. And at the end of the society's first 50 years. She was first elected to the board of directors in 2021 and then twice elected as our president, first in 2023 and again in 2024. She quickly displayed her talents, which were far more than just of a strong NPHS board member, president, and volunteer. She was a determined leader. Her accomplishments for the society are beyond measure. As president, she conducted long-established executive committee meetings with the officers. To the board, she advocated for the society's fiscal transparency, accountability, and active participation. In one short year, 2024, she resurrected the Garden Walk, the House History Walk, and obtained a $25,000 micro grant through the alderman from the city of Chicago. She replaced old appliances, the noble room flooring and chairs, which you're sitting on now and walking on, here over here, installed a new outdoor fence, air conditioner, and furnace. She added a professional volunteer design team committee in her arsenal as she organized the entire house. After all those accomplishments, she set her sights on the long-awaited Book of Norwood Park. Finally, after more than a decade and some years in the making. And some of you may have seen it and obtained a copy. Norwood Park, A View from the Ridge. Was published and launched in December 2024. She reached out to grow the organization. That was one of her primary objectives. And that was through membership, community awareness, and working with the print digital media platforms, as well as through radio and TV. Judy met every one of her goals and hit every high mark. And I might point out that she was a worker. You know, like there are some leaders who sit behind a desk or sit in a lofty chair somewhere and delegate and give orders and so forth. But she did that, but she did more. She got in the trenches herself. She was out there working with people in the yards and so forth. And that's the kind of leadership she demonstrated for a long period of time. The society is a better place because she shared her time and talents with us. And the officers and board of directors promise to continue her legacy as we strive to grow this organization over the next 50 years. So I would like to thank Judith McIntyre for her great contribution, and it probably contributed to some of her illnesses, but she was a hard worker, and she wouldn't have it any other way. So over here we have a photograph of Judy and then some of the other people that were involved with her at various times, at various events here in the history of, short history for her, and the long history of Norwood Park Historical Society. So I want to ask you all to, and I'll remove my hat, to take a moment of silence here for her in remembrance and think about her contributions to what you're seeing today, what you're participating in today, was a lot reflecting what she attempted to accomplish during her time. Okay? Thank you very much. Okay, now we can continue with our meeting, and I'll call on Rich Wimberg to introduce the speaker for which you've all been waiting for here, to relive your days at the Edgewater Beach Hotel. Right, Rich?
John? First of all, thank you, Stan, for that very moving tribute that you gave to Judy, who was so valuable and so much a part and parcel of this organization since she joined it. It's my pleasure this evening to welcome someone many of us know, the eminent historian John Holden, to our November gathering. John is no stranger to the Norwood Park Historical Society. He's been here several times previous and has a long history supporting community-based organizations as president of the Uptown and Edgewater Historical Societies. He is a longtime journalist who has written on a wide range of subject matter, including local zoning issues and politics for the Chicago Tribune and the Chicago Reader. Of note in his impressive body of work is his book, Remembering Edgewater Beach Hotel, co-authored with Kathy Gemperle of the Edgewater Historical Society. Kathy is also, although not with us tonight, is a very powerful and strong leader of that organization, which she too has served for many years. The famous and majestic old Lakeside Hotel opened its doors in 1916 and closed in 1967 and was razed 4 years later. The hotel is the subject of John's presentation this evening, and it evokes memories of a majestic era and building towering over the Lake Michigan shoreline and its wonderful history, its big bands, the Marine Room, and the many famous celebrities who performed there. The Edgewater Historical Society has carefully maintained an archival history of the hotel, and from those resources, John and Kathy reconstructed a compelling narrative with wonderful photos in Remembering Edgewater Beach Hotel. It's a part of the Images of America book series from the Arcadia Publishing Company. I've personally, on a personal note, I've just finished work on the history of the neighboring property adjoining the location of the old Edgewater Beach Hotel, and that is the Saddle and Cycle Club, which is still thriving and is still a vibrant part of the community. And together, the Edgewater Beach and the Saddle and Cycle Club helped ignite the lakefront area of Edgewater and Uptown as destination points. And of course, Uptown evolved into much more beginning in the 1920s, as arguably was the most premier entertainment district outside of the Chicago downtown area. This is our final speaker program for 2025. We will resume again in March with our first 2026 presenter, and that will be someone most of you who live in Norwood Park should know, Irv Kagi, whose family maintained the famous Edison Park newsstand for decades until its closure a few months ago. Irv has even published a book about it, and he will be joining us. We will have a number of other speakers who will be coming out in 2026. We're going to do a program on Chicago bakeries, which Laura is working on. We're going to have a program on stamp collecting and coin collecting. They'll kind of go off in a different path. And we'll also have some other speakers that will be joining us. So with that said, I will turn over the program to John Holden, and please give him a Norwood Park welcome.
Thanks, Rich. I worked at the Village Bake Shop in high school over at Belmont and Oak Park Avenue, so I hope you get them in your book. It was a very popular place. Anyhow, thanks to everyone for coming out this evening, especially my cousin, Mary Kay. Her parents were among the founders of the Historical Society, so it's really a big round of applause for those. They were wonderful people, so wonderful, wonderful people. Anyhow, let's see. So I was in the kitchen when Rich mentioned how many people were at the Edgewater Beach Hotel. Can I get a show of hands so I know who I'm? Okay, so a few of you. Okay. Oh, anyhow, the book is now. It's been out for 4 years, and I've done a number of talks. And over the years, I meet people who are at the talks who've given me so much additional material I could probably write a second book about the stuff they encountered at the Edgewater Beach Hotel. So at the end of the program, I'll try to quickly go into some of that. But and I also have the book for sale, wonderful Christmas gift, and it's marked down to $20, tax included. So I also have a few posters up here. Some of these you'll see in the presentation, but if you want to come up and look afterwards. And then the Tribune gave us a wonderful full-page review of the book when it came out, so that's up here as well. So without further ado, I'll just jump into it. Do I have a time limit on this? I can go for anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour. I don't want to go too long.
4 hours.
4 hours, all right, all right. If I'm running long, you can kind of give me the speeded up signal, Rich. But there's so much to talk about. It's really it was such an exciting place. I was never there myself. My parents were there once. My mom, for a few years, lived very close to the hotel when she was going to Loyola University back in the late 40s. So I've certainly heard about it quite a bit, and its legend precedes it. So, you know, it's been gone for over 50 years now, and I guess, you know, a lot of people who are not familiar with the topic would say, what was so special about it? And it really was a one-of-a-kind place. Certainly in the Midwest, it was a resort hotel, and it had all the amenities of a country club. It was a super elegant place. It was put together by the team that built, by the architect who designed and helped build the Blackstone Hotel, the Drake Hotel, the South Shore Country Club. A man named Benjamin Marshall was kind of the driving force for it, so I'll get into all that in due time. But this first opening image that we have here, it's a bird's eye view from about Argyle looking north, and this would have been in the late 1950s when the city finished the final extension to this point of Lakeshore Drive and Lincoln Park. That all opened up in Lakeshore Drive terminated at Hollywood, which you can kind of see here. I wish I had a laser pointer, but I don't. But you can see where Lakeshore Drive just curves to the left there. So this is the hotel, the tall building there. There were two buildings, and that was the second of the two and the taller of the two. And then, for reference, right around where the road is curving, you see a taller building. That's the Edgewater Beach Apartments, which are still very much there. It was just a front page story in the Sun-Times a couple weeks ago about it getting a fresh coat of pink paint. So that was not part of the hotel. There's a lot of misconception about that. It was built by the same team that did the hotel, the same architects and developers, but It was always a separate property. So the book has over 225 images in it, and the stuff I'll be showing tonight is the stuff we just didn't have room for in the book. Chicago, as many of you might know, is the postcard capital of America. Virtually, I would say like 2/3 to 3/4 of all the postcards in America were printed in Chicago for a long time. And the Edgewater Beach Hotel was certainly a very popular topic for postcards. Nothing better to send off to make your friends envious that you were at the Edgewater Beach Hotel. So this is a view of the hotel taken from the lake, obviously. I'll point out a few things here. So this is the original building here. It was finished in 1916. They built it in record time, I think in less than 18 months. They got it up. And then the second tower, the first building was so successful, they within a couple of years started planning for the second tower, and that was finished in 1923. You can't quite make it out here real clearly. There was a little stage on the lake where they put on like light opera type programming and so forth. People would sit along the shoreline and watch the stage shows. And then behind that, it was a little kind of Quonset hut type building on the east side of the hotel, which was the famed marine dining room where all the entertainment took place. So very popular place. And just a quick word about these postcards. These were originally black and white photos, and then they were later hand painted by the postcard companies. Usually they employed small armies, mainly of women, who had these jobs to hand paint these postcards. So they kind of have a slightly surreal quality to them. Also, I just want to shout out someone who was very helpful in getting the exhibit together in the book was my fellow board member at the Edgewater Historical Society, Marcia Holland, who's with us tonight. So you can correct me. Marcia probably knows more about the topic than I do. So she was very helpful, both with the exhibit and the book. So in any event, this is an interior view of the marine dining room. It was quite a splendid place. It was accessible right off the lobby of the hotel, and as you walked in, there was a staircase that descended to a lower level. They had all windows on the east side, so you're actually seeing the lake there in the background, and then you had these terraces that kind of straddled the main floor and overlooked the whole thing, the floor. So they had dining and dancing on the main floor, and it was really kind of like the nerve center of the hotel for many, many years. This is just another view of the marine dining room. So they would constantly change the decor throughout the year to reflect the various holidays and so forth. This was also the place where it was Chicago's equivalent of Times Square, where the big New Year's Eve countdown would take place. It was broadcast on the radio, and it was the place to be. So the two buildings in the hotel complex were connected. They were about 800-900 feet apart, and they were connected by this long corridor, which in the world of Benjamin Marshall became a grand space in and of itself. It was called the Passaggio. You can see it's a beautifully decorated space, and then they had these two wonderful lobbies off of the Passaggio. The whole thing sat on top of a parking garage as well. It's said that the first indoor parking garage in the world was under the Edgewater Beach Hotel, so that was all part of the expansion with the second building. And then these are the two lounges that straddled the Passaggio. They were wonderful places in and of themselves. Most of the time, they were just places for guests to gather and meet up with their friends and so forth. And then they were also used for a number of private events, weddings and birthday parties, bar mitzvahs, what have you. And this is the other one. So they were beautiful spaces. They got the beam ceilings. They have a lot of the same kind of colonial Spanish decor. They had these clerestory windows that surrounded them, so they were flooded with light. They were right there on the lakefront, and they were beautiful, beautiful spaces. The hotel also, like the Edgewater Beach Apartments, if you've ever been down there, there's a shopping arcade that runs along Sheridan Road, and the hotel had that feature, as did the apartments. The apartments, you can still see it. So there were, I think, in excess of a dozen commercial storefronts in the hotel complex, and they had everything and anything a guest might want. They had this is the florist shop, but they also had women's clothing shops, men's haberdasheries. They had a fine wine and food store. They had all kinds of services like beauty parlors, photography studios. So they said you never really had to leave the complex once you were there. The place also had over a dozen restaurants and bars throughout the complex. This was probably the most famous of all of them. It was called the Yacht Club. It was on the lower level of the original building. It was right on the lakefront, and it was made up to look like you were on an actual ship. So you kind of entered in on the gangplank here, and you were greeted by the captain, and they have all these other nautical accoutrements around the facility. And then they had this canvas roof, and they had canvas walls, and they would, from time to time, simulate the yacht going into bad weather, and everything would start vibrating, and thunder and lightning would start flashing. So quite a dramatic place. So this is that West Lounge that we just saw the interior of. That's the exterior of it, and I think this picture was taken probably right after the completion of the second building, which to my eye it looks like it was, so these buildings were built like the proverbial brick you-know-whats. And there was a layer of brick, but then there was a layer of stucco over all this. So I think this is before the stucco was added. This is the delivery van for the florist shop, and then you can see the entrance to the underground garage there. So this is would have been like 1924. It opened in the middle of the winter, the extension, so go figure. And that's the view of the parking garage. So their selling point, trying to get people to come vacation in Chicago in the middle of winter. They said you don't ever have to go outdoors. You can drive right into the complex. And this is a grand dowager making her entrance on the scene. This isn't a very good picture, but I wanted to include it because it shows this. There was this marvelous, huge terrace on the north end of the original building. And to the north of that was a golf course. There were tennis courts. There was a child's playground. There were strolling gardens, and then there was this 1,000-foot long boardwalk along the lake. They actually had to build a long concrete revetment in order to really form an eastern boundary for the property itself. So obviously it wasn't downtown, but there was a lot of synergy that took place between the hotel and downtown Chicago. So to get guests back and forth from the city, they had an amazing fleet of transport vehicles. They had a fleet of taxis and buses that would be constantly going back and forth. They had regular schedules and so forth. But then they also had boats that could take you to downtown. And if you were in a super hurry, they had their own plane, and you could fly. It was a pontoon plane. You could fly from Edgewater to downtown Chicago. And I think the price there is like $15, and I did the math. It's the equivalent of about $75 or $90 in today's money, which I'd pay that to fly from Edgewater to downtown. So what really put the hotel on the map was the music. The man who ran the hotel from the opening day till the early 1950s was someone in Chicago history is not nearly as well appreciated as he should be. His name was William Dewey. He was kind of to hospitality what Marshall Field was to retail. He was a stickler for service and had impeccable taste, and he also was a hell of a public relations guy. He really had a good sense for how to promote the hotel and burnish this reputation that became worldwide. So I had mentioned the concrete revetment wall was 1,000 feet long, and it was right along the shoreline, and it was the longest boardwalk of its sort west of Atlantic City. So that was a big selling point in the late teens when there really wasn't such a thing as air conditioning. A lot of people even in the city of Chicago would go down to the lakefront and gladly pay to stay there to get away from the worst of the heat in the city. And then just east of the original building was this 5,000 square foot gray marble dance floor. So they had a huge outdoor music scene that went on for decades, and that was really kind of the social event of the year for many people. They would publish a schedule in the spring showing all the acts that would be playing throughout the summer. I've met a number of people who grew up in Chicago. One of the stepfather of one of my best friends, he was an avid boater from the 1940s on, and he said they would take their boat from Diversey Harbor and drop anchor offshore in front of the Edgewater Beach Hotel and get the music for free. So, but it was quite an amazing scene there. This is another postcard just showing what it looks like. So that was also called the Beach Walk, was the name of that venue. So right after the Marine Dining Room, that was the main thing for music. This is a wonderful photo. It's not a great quality image, but it shows you how close this dance floor went right up to the lake. So the interesting thing about the Edgewater Beach Hotel is when they first built it, there really was no beach. They kind of filled in the lakefront there and had this long concrete revetment that stretched along. So the beach came later, but you can see there were piers jutting out from the revetment wall. So there was a lot of interaction between the hotel and the lake, even from the earliest days. So they could literally get thousands of people out into this venue, and I think if it got overserved, there's a good chance you would have wound up in the lake. This is just a view of the Marine Dining Room again. It's showing, I think, a very typical decor for the era, and Mr. Dewey also seemed to have a particular passion for palm trees and palm plants, so those were frequently found throughout the hotel complex. And this is the bandstand that was in the Marine Dining Room, and this is really probably one of the most storied stages in American music, because everybody who was anybody in the music business performed here over the decades, starting in the 20s and going into the mid to late 50s. The bandstand, so the hotel was one of the very first had one of the very first radio stations in the Midwest, WEBH, which is Edgewater Beach Hotel, obviously. And it was, again, right off the lobby. They built a studio, a radio studio, right outside of the Marine Dining Room. There was a glass window between the studio and the bandstand, so the man at the controls in the studio would give the signal to the band leader at 8 o'clock on Saturday nights, and they'd strike up the band, and it was going out to a national audience. They also had special programming that took place just for radio that didn't involve the Marine Dining Room. They had a grand piano in the studio, and they would put on concerts. They also would have lectures and so forth that were all broadcasts. Interestingly, WGN Radio, for the first several months of its existence, used the Edgewater Beach Hotel facilities to broadcast while their studios were being built. So the day WGN went on the air, I think in 1922, 23, It was a big deal, and they had the mayor and I think the governor, everyone was there, and they had a whole day of programming to launch what did go on to become one of America's most storied radio stations. But for the first few months of their existence, they were doing business out of the Edgewater Beach. It's a very interesting story on how the Edgewater Beach got connected with radio in the first place. There were two guys who lived in the neighborhood near the hotel, and they were involved in, they were in the war. They were young guys who were involved in the war, and they were involved in the very earliest uses of radio for military purposes. And after World War I, they came back to Chicago and started their own company, building radio sets in an apartment building in the north end of Uptown. And at some point they met up with Mr. Dewey, and he thought they were very impressive, and he offered to allow them to set up shop on some of the vacant property around the hotel. So they did, and so they were not only building radio sets, but they were putting on their own radio station. And you can see the call letters there, 9ZN, and that ZN, that went on to become Zenith Radio, which was to the American economy in the 20s what Microsoft is to our economy today. So it was kind of the cutting edge of technology coming right out of the Edgewater Beach Hotel. So this is a little, this might have been the very first Radio Shack, I'm not sure, but there they are, right on the shores of Lake Michigan, and this is how they got their broadcast signal out. So it looks like something kids would set up in the backyard, but these are the early days of radio. So the hotel also had its own monthly publication. It was kind of a guide to everything that was going on in the hotel itself, but also all over the city. They had different features in there, including the transportation to get around, so people were constantly going downtown for shows or concerts or to go shopping. And they also had some interesting features in the magazine that I don't think would be permitted today. They would publish lists of all the guests who had stayed at the hotel in the prior month. And Mr. Dewey was very proud of having drawn people from all over the country, and indeed from all over the world, and they would list them by states, who had come from California to stay at the hotel, who had come from Germany or France. So it was all there in the magazine. And this continued on for many decades. So this gives you a slightly better perspective to see some of those features I was pointing out earlier. So these two buildings there, you can see that stage a little more clearly where they did the performances, and then the Marine Dining Room, and then that building between the two, that's the Passaggio with the two lounges that straddled it. And this is a page from the magazine from the 1950s. I think based on the movies there, I'm thinking this is 1954. And I love this page because it kind of shows you how amazing downtown Chicago was for seeing movies, all those theaters, most of which are now long gone. But pretty amazing there. Has anyone been to any of those theaters, or most of them? Yeah. I was at the last screening, the last show at the Woods Theater before they tore it down in the early 90s. It was the movie I'm Gonna Get You, Sucker. Not the most classy goodbye for the theater. So. And this is another page from the same issue in mid-55, so showing some of the great old restaurants that were in downtown Chicago. None of them are around any longer. If I could only travel in time to go back, I would love to. So I talked a little bit about the Edgewater Beach Apartments. There was also residential living that took place at the hotel, which I'll talk about. This is the main entrance to the Edgewater Beach Apartments at Bryn Mawr and Sheridan. The building has been remarkably maintained over the years, and it's largely all the bells and whistles are still largely there, except for these kind of grand colonnades that were over the front entrance. Those were taken down some years ago, as were those giant urns, but otherwise it's still looking very much well kept as it's approaching its 100th birthday. This is the lobby of the Edgewater Beach Apartments, which it still looks almost exactly the same, right down to the furniture. And this is a promotional postcard for the apartments. So the Edgewater Beach Apartments were, they opened in 1929, not too long before the stock market crash, so their timing wasn't great there. So the original hotel building is about 5400 north, and then the annex was built to the south of it, so that's around 5300 north. But they owned all that property that goes all the way up to Bryn Mawr, and Benjamin Marshall in his mind had these grandiose visions to build a series of like 5 or 6 hotels, culminating with the largest one that was going to be at Bryn Mawr, which he thought that alone would be about 5,000 rooms, which is about twice the size of the Hilton Hotel on Michigan Avenue. So he thought big. He didn't always hit the mark, but he had big plans, and he envisioned a big complex of enclosed gardens and a big movie palace theater on the property. He really had great visions, but they kind of scaled down, and when they built the apartments, that was kind of the last of the major development that happened on the property, although there was always more land to do more. So this photo was taken by the Heydrich Blessing architectural photography company, which was kind of like the creme de la creme of architectural photography. This is the men's barber shop that was in the apartments, but they also had similar facilities in the hotel. This is an image of, there's a lap pool in the Edgewater Beach Apartments, and they would kind of set up for breakfast and lunch on the terrace next to it. They just restored this whole area, so that's all still very much in use. So in the mid-30s, with the Depression dragging on, the hotel did have some slack years with business, so they converted a number of floors in the hotel building to permanent residences, so they had to remodel the units and combine rooms and so forth. And this is a marketing postcard, I think kind of designed to show the kind of clientele they were looking for, kind of more mature people, but and it was largely occupied by older people. But my friend Marcia here, who did a lot of research on the hotel, found that there were some children that were living in the hotel in the 1940 census, and one of them went on to become a fairly important person in Edgewater history, Mary Lou Headland, and she helped inspire some other interesting stories. That's all kind of in the book, so I won't dwell on that. This is just a picture of Bryn Mawr Avenue in the mid-1920s, looking east from just east of Broadway. So that's the it's the northern edge of the Edgewater Beach Hotel, like the farthest building back. But there were other larger apartment hotel buildings that were built on Bryn Mawr and around the neighborhood in general. I think a lot of that was stimulated by the prestige of the Edgewater Beach Hotel. The street is still largely intact. A lot of those buildings that you see here are still there. There is more and more pressure for development in Edgewater. That's a whole other story. I won't go into that tonight, but this was really one of the finest commercial streets in the city back in the day. So yeah, the hotel was on the lake, obviously, and you know, that was kind of its primary selling point for many people. This is what the area looked like before the hotel was built. It was a very irregular shoreline. It was kind of swampy property. These crude wooden piers that were constructed, allowed people to get out into the lakefront without sinking into the marsh. I'm guessing this might have been from like the earliest years of the 20th century. And then this is a very early image of the first hotel building, showing off a lot of those features I was just talking about. So you can see the marine dining room over here on the left. You can see that revetment wall. You don't see any beach there, do you? But you had the piers, and people were canoeing and boating off the pier from the get-go. You can also see a couple of smaller buildings. So there were a number of very beautiful mansions all up and down Sheridan Road back in the day, and we had a number of prominent people, including Oscar Mayer, who lived over in that neck of the woods. This was, again, part of what made it popular. And this is the same image that I have here. So this is one of the classic postcards advertising the hotel, showing off all its features there that I'd mentioned: the tennis courts, the golf course, the beach promenade, the playground, etc. Also, I just want to call your attention to that piece of land that's jutting out into the lake. That's right along Sheridan Road, at Foster. And that was basically constructed out of they filled in the lake, and that part of the lake was completed sometime in the mid-1930s. So it kind of created this kind of this corner pocket area right in front of the beach, and for that matter, the Saddle and Cycle Club. And then the natural circulation patterns of the lake and so forth were basically just carrying the sand and dumping it in that corner. So the beach just started to develop on its own. And that esplanade that I mentioned earlier, that's that kind of pink area right up there in the middle there.
It says 15 minutes to the east.
Yep. I'm not sure if that's by plane, boat, or bus, but I think with very little traffic, you could get down Lakeshore Drive in about 15 minutes. You can still do that to this day. So, and you can see some of those houses. So the west side of Sheridan Road, more or less, had the mansions. And this is probably the most famous postcard of the whole Edgewater Beach complex. This is from the late 1940s. It was by the Kurt Tyke Company, which you Chicago historians are probably familiar with. So this is probably around the time where the beach had reached its greatest size before the job of infilling the lake to create the Lakeshore Drive extension started. So here's the hotel over here on the left, and then you have the apartments. This is the Renaissance apartment building, which is still very much there. But the footprint of where the hotel building has changed dramatically, and this poster here was done by one of our other board members at the museum, and who's an architect, and he draws the outlines of the buildings that replaced the hotel complex. So if you want to take a look at that at the end of the program, feel free. So I love this image. It's a very crude image. I found it online. You see the hotel complex and the apartments there. This is coming off of Lakeshore Drive as it swung west on Foster, probably like in the 1940s. Very evocative view of the whole complex. And then it swung 41, or Lakeshore Drive. It swung up on Sheridan Road, and this is going right past the hotel complex. So that tall building on the right there you see is the corner of the annex, which was an enormous complex in and of itself. So the original hotel building had 400 rooms. The annex had 600, a total of 1,000 rooms, made it one of the biggest hotels in the country at the time. And they had so much more than just a hotel. So this image shows when they started the work to start filling in the lake for the expansion of Lincoln Park. So they basically just started putting pylons east of the complex by about, it's somewhere just shy of a quarter mile east of where the old shoreline had been. And they literally just started dumping earth in where a lake had been. The park extension itself is about 77 acres, which is a substantial chunk of land that they reclaimed from the lake bottom. And this work started in the early 1950s. This is the Edgewater Beach Apartments here. Interestingly, the green light for this project was given by Mayor Kennelly, who was first elected in 1947. Interestingly, he lived in the Edgewater Beach Apartments at the time, so he was thought to be one of the more honest men to occupy the office of mayor in Chicago, so he definitely probably did not help his own property values by allowing the lake to be filled in right outside their front door. So this project took several years to complete. The earth that they got for this lake fill project was being excavated from the west side of Chicago when the city was building the Eisenhower Expressway. So we were literally moving heaven and earth back in the days. It's almost inconceivable to think of any kind of public works project like that being undertaken today. But they got things done back in those days. And then this is another image when they had just completed the extension looking to the south. So you can see the hotel, which had been right there on the waterfront before, is now somewhat cut off, but they did have a strolling path that you could take down. It goes under Lakeshore Drive there and gets you right onto the lakefront, and that's still there, so you can still walk that path. But you weren't right on the lake anymore, so they had to compensate somehow. So they immediately started working on building a pool for the hotel, exclusively for the pool, for the hotel. And it wasn't just any old pool, it was the biggest pool in Chicago. This was built where the golf course had been. Anyone in the room, were you ever in the pool? I had a number of people who've attended talks, and they've had some really great stories. It was apparently a very popular place to hang out in the 60s. It was quite a party scene, and they had this huge pool. It was surrounded by a series of cabanas, these two-story cabanas, kind of in a horseshoe. So it was like its own world back there in the 50s and 60s. And all kinds of activities went on. They had these wild fashion shows that took place. They had beauty pageants, and they would have all kinds of events around the whole fun in the sun idea. So if you were ever a guest at the hotel, every year you would get a Christmas card from the hotel. And I don't know whether this is true or not. They suggest that they would freeze the pool and turn it into a ice skating rink. Not sure if that ever really happened or not. And they did have ice skating on the tennis courts. They would freeze the tennis courts back in the day. So, yeah, it doesn't seem likely, but it's a cute image. So. And then this is a man who, this man in the middle here, the ringleader of this gang. Without him, there probably wouldn't be any museum for the Edgewater Historical Society. He was a local boy named Everett Stetson, and he spent his whole life in Edgewater. Marcia knew him back in the day. Oh, you didn't know him? Oh, okay. The famous line about Chicago is that the whole lakefront is completely open and free to the public, but that wasn't the case at the Edgewater Beach Hotel. They actually had a fence that separated their beach from what's now Foster Avenue Beach. So Everett and his crowd were on the other side of the fence. So, but they had a fondness for it. And actually, little side note on Foster Avenue Beach that kind of ties into this neighborhood. The original play Grease has a number about Foster Avenue Beach because all those kids from Taft High School used to go down here, and I'm guessing it was a gang that looked a little like this one here. So, anyhow. So yeah, I talked a little bit about Mr. Dewey, William Dewey, and that's him, the very distinguished gentleman standing up in the back of that photo. He was the nephew of one of the founding partners of the whole hotel complex, and I think it might be the only time in Chicago history where nepotism actually produced something valuable. But he was there as the general manager of the hotel for 36 years. He eventually moved into the hotel after he got divorced and lived there up until the end of his life, and he literally died just a couple of years after he stepped down from being general manager of the hotel. This is a picture from World War II. He was an extraordinarily patriotic guy, and during the war, the hotel became kind of a big center of all these efforts to support the war effort. He would host all kinds of USO-type activities, and many members of the military were guests at the hotel for either nothing or greatly reduced rates, and there were all kinds of support groups that were working at the hotel, women's sewing groups to help put together parachutes and uniforms and such for the war effort. So really kind of an amazing time. Maybe the pinnacle of the whole history of the hotel. So by the late 40s, the hotel, after the war, kind of Americans started venturing out a little more for their vacations and travel. The idea of driving to destinations was growing in popularity. There was more and more air flights and train travel. So the kind of built-in clientele from the Chicago metro area that would come to the hotel started to drop off a bit, and then the hotel started pivoting more into the realm of the trade shows. And this is, I think, kind of from the late 1948, and it's kind of those two worlds converging. The guy from the trade show kind of running into these fur-clad dowagers on the side. And this was, the story of the hotel is really also the story of the thousands of people who work there, and they had an enormous workforce in the hotel. The kitchen alone employed somewhere in the neighborhood of 300-400 people, and it was a massive operation. It supplied not only the restaurants that were in the hotel, but also all the catering for banquets and so forth. There was the ballroom that was in the original, in the annex hotel building could seat 1,000 guests. So that was one of the biggest ballrooms in the city. And then also all the room service and so forth. So it was a massive operation in that kitchen, which was located on the ground floor of the hotel. And they would churn out somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 meals a day. And this woman, what was Marlis's last name? Stanton, I think, yeah, at the end. So this lady started as an assistant in the kitchen during World War II. She quickly was promoted to, I think, pastry. She was a pastry chef, and she eventually ended up marrying the man who was the head of all the food service at the hotel. After the hotel closed, they took over the Swedish bakery in Andersonville, and their family ran that for a number of years. She just passed away a couple of years ago at like 96 or 97. She was delighted to see the book come out, and she gave us the photo for the book here. And this is a man named Mr. Gonzalez, just another person who worked in the kitchens. But you could see they had a very sophisticated. Your bakery book might appreciate this. They had all their own bakeries, and everything was going on. They published their own cookbook, the Edgewater Beach Hotel. It's a salad book. It's mainly salads. We got a couple copies of it at our museum, but they were noted for their salads, and there are some really truly exotic creations there. This is a photo that was donated to our museum. We don't know who these people are, but this is, I think, a couple on their wedding day out in front of the main entrance of the hotel. So there was this beautiful portico that kind of welcomed you into the hotel complex. There's that wonderful sign there, the Edgewater Beach Hotel, on that kind of shield. And our museum has the biggest collection of materials on the Edgewater Beach Hotel. We don't have that sign, though. That's in the collection of the Chicago History Museum, and that's actually on display in that big front atrium of the museum there. But there were probably, I can't even begin to fathom, there are very few records that survived from the hotel, so trying to guess how many weddings might have taken place at the hotel or how many honeymoons were spent there, you can only speculate, but it was in the thousands or tens of thousands undoubtedly. And I've met so many people. I've got cousins and other friends who, oh, my parents had their honeymoon at the Edgewater Beach. So, and they also did a lot of proms. This is from the late 1950s. This is St. Gregory High School. These kids look so mature for. But they're probably all like 18 years old. So this is in the Marine Dining Room, which got a pretty wild makeover in the 50s. During that time, there was this great passion for all things dealing with the South Pacific. Maybe because of the musical or because of so many guys in the military had kind of become acquainted. But they turned the Marine Dining Room into something called Polynesian Village, and there's a picture in the book here, a double-page spread. They truly made the whole thing over, and they had like grass hut roofs and so forth. The waiters are wearing these kind of kimono-like smocks, and you see all the kind of primitive artwork there. So. And then it got made over again in the 60s into more of a corporate event space that continued to have entertainment. So the hotel also became famous because of how many famous people were there at some point. And this is maybe one of the first people who rose to fame in conjunction with the hotel. This is Johnny Weissmuller when he was still in his teens, and he kind of first made a name for himself as a swimmer in a swim meet that was held out in front of the Edgewater Beach Hotel. He set a world record, and within a year or two, he was in the 1920 Olympics, where he won a bunch of gold medals, and then he went back to the Olympics again in 24 and won even more gold medals, and he was about as famous an athlete as there was in America at the time. And then within the next few years, he was Tarzan in all the Tarzan movies. So he maintained a lifelong connection with the hotel during the 1960s when the pool was kind of going on. He would make celebrity appearances there and sign autographs. And one of our members was vacationing down in Miami, and there's a Swimmers Hall of Fame down there, and they saw this item that was on display. It was a medal that was awarded to, I believe, Johnny Weissmuller, and it's showing it's the Edgewater Beach Hotel. And there's this little crest over here. This was kind of the official crest of the hotel. So the original hotel building, like the apartments, kind of had what's called a Maltese cross form. So it was like kind of an X, and you see the gardens on either side and the sailboat there on the east side of the complex. And then another famous person who spent a pivotal night at the hotel was Babe Ruth. And here he is with his wife. It might have been one of the few occasions where he was photographed with his wife, because he was often running around with other women. But he was in town in 1932 for the World Series with the Cubs. The Edgewater Beach Hotel had many baseball players stay there, because a lot of the teams who came to play the Cubs would stay there. So this is a photo from the Tribune, and it was the night before his famous called shot out in was it left field or center field? Yeah. So, and the rumor is that he was as he was leaving the Edgewater Beach Hotel, some overzealous Cub fans spat on him, and that kind of stuck in his craw, and he was like, I'll show those Cubs fans. So the called shot was history, and then for the record, the Yankees swept the Cubs in that World Series. So Babe Ruth got his revenge. So I talked a little bit about the early theater and the musical theater that they would do on that stage on the lake. In the 50s, after Lakeshore Drive was extended, the Beach Walk outdoor dance venue kind of wasn't feasible any longer because all the car traffic would obviously drown out the music. But a couple of enterprising young guys from the neighborhood got the idea of erecting a kind of like a circus tent on that space, and they did 6 or 7 years of like summer stock theater at the hotel. But it wasn't just a bunch of high school kids putting on a show. They got like a lot of the biggest names in theater and the movies to appear there. So this is the actress Susan Strasberg. She's the daughter of Lee Strasberg, the famous founder of the method acting school in New York City. This is a production of Antony and Cleopatra. She co-starred with the actor Franch Attone in this show. But other people like Groucho Marx put on a show there. Mae West had the premiere of her kind of comeback play was called Sextet in the late 50s. Mae West appeared there, but the whole other range of stars, there are more of those in the book. But the hotel also had a few very notorious episodes, and this might be the main one. This woman here who's being booked by the police, her name was Ruth Steinhagen, and she, she was a very enthusiastic Cubs fan, and she became obsessed with one of the Cubs players, a guy named Eddie Waitkiss. He was later traded to Philadelphia, but when Philadelphia was in town to play the Cubs, he was staying at the hotel. He was in the hotel bar, and he got this cryptic note asking him to come up to see someone in a hotel room. And when he got there, she was waiting with a shotgun and shot him in the chest. And miraculously, he survived. She obviously had mental health issues, which she would go on to deal with, and then I guess left and led a very ordinary life afterward. But Eddie Waitkiss, that whole episode became the basis for the book The Natural, which was later turned into the movie with Robert Redford and Glenn Close. Anyone know who this is? Jimmy Hoffa, yeah. He was another guy who became very synonymous with the hotel in the 1960s. The Teamsters had a lot of their meetings at the hotel. He would often rent out the presidential suite, which back in the day went for something like in the neighborhood of $1,000 a day. So he was living high on the hog back in those days, and he was at the hotel around the time when he was indicted as well by Robert F. Kennedy, who was the Attorney General, crusading against corruption in the unions. I don't know why I could never get this picture to position in the right position. I can only conclude this guy is so crooked. Not even his picture will display upright. So this is a guy named Fifi Buccieri. He was a Chicago mobster. He was having a big birthday party at the Edgewater Beach Hotel the last summer it was open. And unbeknownst to him, the waiters were all undercover FBI agents, and there was a big sting. And he eventually went to prison. So you're getting close to the end here. So the 1960s, the hotel kind of was going through a lot of business turmoil. It had been bought and sold a few times. The last owners got it through like a leveraged buyout where they borrowed a lot of money to buy the hotel, and then they had to make all these onerous loan payments. So they started kind of cutting corners around the hotel, and that didn't go unnoticed by a lot of people, but it was still very much a thriving enterprise right up until the end. So this is a view of like one of the more elegant lounges. This was the women's lounge from the original hotel building. They kind of started doing a very kind of corporate-like makeover on all the public spaces throughout the hotel in the 50s and early 60s. So this is one of the lounges. Every floor in both of the hotel buildings had these private lounge areas for the guests. So you can see, you can come in and watch TV or what have you. It's very mid-century looking, yep. And then also, the hotel was still very popular in the post-war era, and it inspired a bunch of new motels. Motels were the big thing in post-war America. You could drive right up to your room and never have a nosy desk clerk know who you're going in and out of your room with. So there were 3 different motels that were built right in the general vicinity of the Edgewater Beach. This one was on Sheridan Road at Catalpa, and was there until just about, I think, 6 or 7 years ago. They tore it down and they just built a new apartment building there. The other was right next door to the Saddle and Cycle Club. So this is a scene from the 50s. You can see that original portico that I talked about earlier. You see the buses and the taxis that are all servicing the area. So this was taken from just across the street. So the hotel, it came to a very abrupt end, and this is a picture from the last day. It was 2 days before Christmas in 1967, where the owners announced that they were closing the hotel that day. And all the hotel guests were told to pack your bags and get out. And this is a photo from the Tribune where one of the waiters at the hotel is learning of his sad fate just before Christmas. So I had mentioned that there were residents in the hotel building, and some of the people who had moved in when they first became available in the 30s were still there till closing day. And those people who were living at the hotel were given 1 day to get out. They had to be out by Christmas Eve. So heartless bastards, to put it mildly. So it was a big real estate play. They had these visions of building, a complex of towers that would replace the hotel. This was before the whole concept of preservation was really very well widely known or accepted in America. So there really was no fuss or anything. I mean, it was a national news when they closed the hotel. It was the end of an era, obviously. So this is from the last day that the hotel was open, and you can see they modernized. They gave like a mid-century modern new portico entrance, and you got that sign for the hotel, and that's advertising who the entertainers are in the Marine dining room. And one of them was George Goebel. Anyone remember him? I think he was the most frequent substitute host for Johnny Carson on The Tonight Show, but he was a very deadpan kind of comedian from Chicago, so it's kind of appropriate that the hangdog comedian was kind of the last man performing at the hotel. And this is another very grainy photo that wasn't suitable for the book, but we found it on the internet. This is a woman named Mrs. Kim. She was an entertainer. She was a Korean-American lady who lived at the hotel, and here she is waving goodbye to the whole era. So, they closed for business at the end of 1967, but they didn't really have immediate plans to get the building down. So for the next year, the hotel was actually leased by Loyola University and used as a dorm. And this is a photo of a couple of the Loyola kids enjoying the hotel. There was one of those students who lived at the hotel came to one of my earlier talks, and she said it was like dying and going to heaven. Being a college student living at the Edgewater Beach Hotel, they had the run of the whole place. That presidential suite at the top of the hotel that Jimmy Hoffa used to lease, that was the student lounge. So. But it only lasted a year. Loyola was in the process of building a new dorm building, so they had to use this in the interim. But then eventually the end did come to the whole hotel. In '69, they had a giant auction where they basically sold off everything they could. in the hotel. This looks like one of those little nautical features, maybe from the yacht club. But there was obviously, you know, huge amounts of, cutlery, and they had all their own monogrammed china, cutlery, ashtrays, linens, furniture, you name it. They sold everything they could. And we have a very good collection of a lot of the stuff from the hotel at our museum. So, that was it. That was the last ignoble stop for the hotel. And they gave the demolition contract was awarded to a company out of Cleveland. They thought it would be a 5-month job, but the place was built so solidly it took them 13 months to get it down, and it nearly bankrupted the demolition company. So the hotel didn't go down without a fight. This image here is another thing we found on the internet, but this is while the hotel's being torn down. These three goofballs are standing up on the roof of the taller building. You can see the sailboats out there on the lake, and this section of the roof is already like caving in as it's being torn down. So how these guys got up there, I don't know, but I got a brother, one of my brother-in-laws had some friends who might have been, you know, they were among these guys who were like sneaking into the hotel. It was about empty for about 1.5 years before they finally started tearing it down. But even as they were tearing it down, these urban adventurers, as they call them. So this is just a picture of the original hotel building and the process of being torn down. I don't know if this is, this wouldn't have been taken from the Saddle and Cycle property. This is just the Lincoln Park area out in the front here. And you know, the people came from all over and would be gawking and watching the demolition, and I'm sure there were a lot of tears and so forth in the process. So I'll kind of end the main part of the presentation here with just this classic view of the main entrance of the hotel on Sheridan Road back in the teens. So, and now I'll be quickly because I know I'm going long here, but I told you I was picking up a lot of information from people who come to the talk, so I threw in a few supplemental slides. This is a wonderful postcard of the hotel complex as well. So. But just a few more of the famous people who were involved with the hotel. This is Xavier Cugat, who was the main band leader at the hotel for many, many years off and on. He was constantly coming back and forth, and he was also involved in one of the more scandalous moments in the hotel's history. He had a band singer named Abby Lane who was with him, and he was a married man, but he and Abby Lane had kind of started a relationship, and one day his wife caught them in the act at the Edgewater Beach Hotel, and that was the end of his marriage there. So, but Xavier Cugat was there from the 20s well into the 50s, off and on. Another guy who started out at the Edgewater Beach Hotel. Does anyone know who this is? Desi Arnaz. So Lawrence, we got something in the book. Lawrence Welk was also someone who got his early start at the Edgewater Beach Hotel. And from there, he became like a permanent fixture over at the Aragon Ballroom, but Desi Arnaz started in Lawrence Welk's band. So Liberace was also a regular performer at the hotel. I learned this after I started reading Ray Kroc's autobiography. Ray Kroc was a piano player at the Edgewater Beach Hotel before he revolutionized bad food. So there are all these people. If you Google the Edgewater Beach Hotel, you'll find something from the Tribune that talks about all these famous people who had been there, like Cary Grant, Betty Davis, Dwight Eisenhower, FDR, Marilyn Monroe. We're not sure if any of that was actually true or not. Some of what we think might have been overblown hype. So I wasn't sure about Marilyn Monroe, and we didn't put her in the book, but when I was giving a talk, this lady said, Marilyn Monroe was there. When I was like 5 years old, I danced with her on the dance floor in the Marine dining room. So we can vouch for Marilyn Monroe now. Another story I got from one of our audience members, Jackie Robinson not only broke the color line in baseball, he might have broke the color line